Well, I read Atlas Shrugged when I was a young engineer working at Digital Equipment Corporation. And the one thing I'll give Ayn Rand is that she certainly knows how to stroke the egos of the highly intelligent engineers and technologists and people who are turning ideas into reality through technology and science. And certainly she stroked my ego. But it didn't take too long for me to recognize that there were some flaws in her understanding of reality and some of the false choices she was presenting to the readers. I think probably the biggest false choice was this idea that you had a choice between either laissez-faire capitalism, free market capitalism, and pure and absolute collectivism, or socialism or communism. I don't think that that's the only choices that are available to us. I think for any number of discrete systems, discrete markets, there are choices that can be made whether or not it should be a private enterprise or whether or not it should be a public enterprise, all right? Whether or not property should be privatized or whether or not property is public, And I think those choices are made ad hoc depending upon which system is better capable of functioning, okay? Now, when you talk about, shoes, certainly you don't want the government making shoes. I think that's ridiculous. There's no motivation to improve product. People won't take care of their own shoes. It's just, and houses are another good example. I think the idea that people own their own houses is an excellent idea. I wouldn't want to have the government owning housing because people wouldn't take care of them, all right? It's plain and simple, all right? But there are other cases where there's public property, things we share, that if we don't have some representative protecting and maintaining that public property, it is going to be destroyed by the private market. The private market will externalize whatever effects it has on public property, and it will ultimately be destroyed. It's what's happening to our environment, to the ecology, to the economy. When we let the economy run wild, people destroy the economy. It's just, we need some entity that's willing to protect public interest, okay? The other sort of dichotomy, I think, is this idea that either you have to be completely and utterly selfish or completely and utterly altruistic. I don't think anyone is. I think our human nature is much more complex than that. I think we have embedded within our evolutionary history and within our genes, in our very innate makeup, our instincts, some fundamental ways in which we are altruistic, okay? That's not to say we would gladly sacrifice our life or sacrifice our property. No, but there are, the number of charities there are, the number of people who commit random acts of kindness to strangers is testament to the fact that human behavior is not completely selfish, all right? And that we depend upon a certain amount of altruism in order for us to function as a society. And it's very important. In fact, we call people who have none of this altruistic streak, we call them sociopaths or psychopaths, because they have not a care in the world about what they do affects other people, okay? So it's very important that we, at least in an innate sense, and even on an unconscious level, have some degree of altruism, and we care what other people think about us. We care about the feelings of others. It's very important for us as a society to remain cohesive, all right? And it's innate. It's part of our evolutionary history. It's in our genes. It's baked in, The very fact that our emotions are hardwired to our facial muscles, that our expressions are very difficult for us to contain, okay? That We know a lot about the mental state of a person by their facial expressions, and it's hardwired. It's not something we fake. This is altruism. This is being honest about your feelings with others. This is the basis of empathy and a lot of other things. When someone gives us an expression, we have reason to believe it. Okay? And that is the basis of empathy, a lot of other things. There's a lot of ways in which human nature is altruistic. Now, it could be argued that we're, altruistic out of, selfish reasons, that it's ultimately boils down to enlightened self-interest. And I think to a large extent that is true. But I think it's something that through evolution, because we don't have time to go through the mental calculations about what's our enlightened self-interest all the time. I mean, that would be just too much of a burden to think along those lines. I think a lot of it is just baked into our basic behavior, that we're altruistic. Our genes make us altruistic for very selfish reasons. But I still think the altruism is baked into our genetic code. All right, and it's certainly not one extreme or the other. Okay, so if I were to level a complaint at Ayn Rand, is that I think her positions are far too extreme, and she presents only extreme choices when she presents her arguments. And you could call them straw men. I believe there is a more moderate path, and I think that whether or not we are altruistic or selfish, or whether or not we should have private market or public property, I think this all goes on a case-by-case basis. Okay, I don't see it as being any sort of ideology. I think it's whatever is the most functional. Okay, and that for me is the operative word. That's you find. Especially in social organizations, families function. Families cannot function without some degree of altruism, right? So societies cannot function without some level of altruism. So that's all for now.